My Bojack Horseman videos have always provoked massive arguments in the comment sections about where things are going, what I'm wrong about, and oh my god, how could someone possibly think that? And a lot of the wild speculation that I've been doing over the years has been proven utterly wrong, but let me just have this one, alright? Ha! I fucking told you all that Princess Carolyn and Judah would end up getting together. Seriously, why would they have that line where Judah tells Princess Carolyn where he lives and Princess Carolyn says, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," if that wasn't where they were going with it? Really, I've been wrong about a lot of things, but why was anyone doubting me on this? That is a blatant setup. If it wasn't, why was it in there? Anyway, so my worst fear about how the series might end didn't happen. Fortunately, Bojack does not bow out by throwing himself off the bridge like Secretariat did. In fact, he doesn't die at all, which was always a possibility, what pretty much everyone was afraid would happen, and they leave you hanging so fucking sadistically over that one. What I was right about though was that Season 6 Part 2 is the gnarliest, heaviest, most difficult 8 episodes of any TV show that I've ever watched, but I survived them, and I'm proud of myself for doing so, because fucking Christ this was difficult to sit through. But I couldn't look away for a second. I needed to know what was going to happen, and I needed some reassurance that there was some light at the end of this. Bojack is a character that we're invested in, identify with, and while he has done terrible things over the years, we do still like him. And while the bulk of the show has been a process of analysing Bojack himself and why he behaves the way he does, Season 6 Part 1 draws a line under that and openly says, now we know why he behaves the way he does, we're done with it, and then Season 6 Part 2 turns the tables and starts analysing the audience and starts asking why we feel the way we feel about Bojack. For Bojack to now be made to look back at all the events of the show, all the horrible yet hilarious shit that he's done for our amusement, and for all of that to finally come to a head and for everything to come crashing down around him is fucking crushing. He deserves everything he gets, sure, but it's hard to admit that to ourselves because, well, he's Bojack. He's our lovable alcoholic celebrity screw-up who gets into all these hilarious situations for our amusement. Some of the terrible things that happen to these people are directly his fault, some of them aren't, but he is implicated in all of it. He can't be held responsible for the dysfunction of others, of course, but he has compounded situations and made them worse for our amusement, and that plays a part in why we like him. Alright, maybe not all of what happened to these incidental characters can be blamed on Bojack. In fact, my reading of his involvement in Dr. Champ's downfall was one of the things that most people were countering when I talked about Season 6 Part 1. And sure, it's not Bojack's direct fault that Dr. Champ drank again, but he was implicated in it. He was implicated in a wacky sitcom scenario where he had the booze on him, lost it in a farcical over-the-top manner, and it ends up getting Dr. Champ drunk. Just like it was also technically Sarah Lynn's own decision to go on the bender with Bojack at the end of Season 3 that killed her. She's the one who starts trying to talk him into doing heroin with her, and he is refusing at first, but then there's a silly cutaway gag that he's just sort of ended up making because, hey, that's Bojack for you. He always looks like he's about to make the right decision, but then, oh no, he fucked up. Classic Bojack. These reversal gags were a tool used to get the audience on Bojack's side and stick us all in this moral quandary where we know we shouldn't endorse his actions, but those actions are carried out in a way that make us laugh, and so we're just naturally warm to him and therefore we do still like him. And the important thing to note is that we like him not in spite of what he does, but because of what he does. And honestly, what does that say about us? What does that say about the whole wacky, farcical animated sitcom format where we're always looking for ways out for Bojack? We're always looking for reasons to excuse him and shift the blame for his implication in events like Sarah Lynn and Penny and Dr. Champ. The only one we can't really do that for is Gina, unless of course you're going to blame the drugs, which I'd think is a bit of a stretch to be honest. Those kids in Escape from LA had already started drinking when they ran into Bojack. It was their choice to do that, and Bojack looks like he's going to be the responsible adult, but then, oh no, he offers to buy them more alcohol and peer pressure them into drinking too much, because that's just what he's like. Hey, that's Bojack for you. He always looks like he's gonna do the right thing, but then he fucks up. That makes us laugh, and so we excuse his behaviour. These incidents may not all be Bojack's fault, but just being in Bojack's orbit has made these people's lives worse, because he's the archetypal screw-up sitcom character. And the screw-up sitcom character usually never has to atone for their terrible actions because the audience grows fond of them and wants them to succeed, at least in part, because of those terrible actions. actions. Look at Homer Simpson, look at Eric Cartman. Their terrible actions make us laugh, and that plays a part in why we're fond of them. Cartman got a kid's parents killed and cooked them into chili and fed them to him. And yet we're not put off by that. I'll make you eat your parents has kinda turned into a running joke on the show. Bojack assaulted Gina on screen right in front of us, and it just didn't seem to matter. We weren't put off by that, and we're continuing to root for him because he's Bojack. That's just how this format works. Terrible things done by a character that we find amusing excuses the moral implications, and we as the audience want him to continue to act this way because otherwise the show wouldn't work. And that is awful, of course it is. We shouldn't endorse their actions, but we can't help it because that's just how the format works. And slapping us in the face with this now, right at the end of the series, and heavily suggesting that this grand re-evaluation of everything that's happened is going to lead to Bojack's suicide, is what makes Bojack Horseman the true antidote to wacky adult animated sitcoms, because the show is now looking directly at the viewer and it's going, "Why did you laugh at that?
Please, put me inside you.
I'm not going to shoot heroin with you, Sarah Lynn. We can snort heroin like sophisticated adults.
Why did we laugh at that? Why didn't we all just write Bojack off as a lost cause based on his actions in this episode alone? Well, the way his actions are presented to us have made us laugh, and that laughter makes us warm to him on that basis. You shouldn't feel sorry for Bojack in episode 13 of season 6, where everyone around him finds out everything he did, but you do because of the way his character's been constructed. And so the tenterhooks you're left on waiting to see if Bojack kills himself are gut-wrenching on a level that I've never seen before in any TV show, because it's actively judging the audience for their tacit endorsement of his actions over the years. We want him to continue to fuck up because we get enjoyment from him fucking up, and if he stopped, the show would end. And this is an effective commentary on our celebrity culture, because on some level, we must kinda want our celebrities to be flawed in some way, because if they weren't, then they wouldn't be nearly as interesting. Bojack loses almost everything that being a celebrity has brought him. His money, his home, friendships, his fucking half-sister. Jesus, that moment kills you. But he doesn't lose the fame. The fame turns into his punishment, and that stupid little show that brought so many people so much happiness and got him where he is turns out to have been the worst thing that ever happened to him. He was punishing himself all these years for the shitty things he did because, like he said to Dr. Champ in the bar in episode 6 of this season, he's internalised this message that he deserves punishment because of his awful upbringing, but up until now he hasn't had effective punishment for his actions, and so he does it to himself. But self-punishment never actually does anything, and so he acts out even more. Just like his attempt at self-medication in season 5 didn't work, self-punishment is not actual punishment, and importantly, it doesn't teach him the error of his ways. Sure, he can feel bad about what he did, but he just continues doing the same shit because he hasn't actually learnt from his mistakes, and that behaviour is endorsed and encouraged by the lack of consequences for it, and in punishing himself he ends up hurting other people, like when he left LA to stay with Charlotte and Penny, like when he invited Sarah Lynn on that bender, like when he ran off and lived up at the old Sugarman place and tricked the dragonfly into flying again. These were incidents that were initiated by Bojack having fucked something up and feeling bad about himself, and during a period of self-punishment, he made things worse for people and himself, and the cycle continued. And he always looked as if he was about to learn something from all these incidents, but then, oh no, he didn't. He fucked something up again and everything got reset as the sitcom format demands. Classic Bojack. The entire show's a meta-commentary on this type of format, and the way they've ended it is totally breaking it. It's important that Bojack's downfall happened now, post-rehab. If a downfall had happened while Bojack was still in that cycle, like the one that he proposed to Diane at the end of season 5 before he'd got sober and sorted his shit, he would have just lashed out and continued self-punishing, and other people would have gotten caught up in more of his shit. Bojack needed to be pushed in the right direction to learn how to be a responsible person, and then be reminded of all this shit in the heaviest way possible as a warning to him to never act this way again. Media takedowns can be incredibly dangerous, and people can get caught in the crossfire, as happened in season 5 with Henry Fondle and WhatTimeIsItRightNow.com. But Bojack did need to have some consequences for his actions that weren't self-administered in order to actually change. Cause hell, I didn't even clock it until Biscuits Braxby brings it up in the second interview. The Jameson incident in the first episode of this season, yeah, he probably did do more harm than good there. The difference between this Bojack and pre-rehab Bojack was that he was actually trying to do the right thing this time round, but he didn't have to go with her to that party. And he did still give in to his worst instincts there, if only for a second, where he trashed her dad's car. He wanted to have the appearance of being a responsible adult when he followed Jameson out that night, but he hadn't fully changed without the media takedown to balance his perspective and humble him. And there is still hope for Bojack in spite of everything that happened. Like Princess Carolyn says, people have short memories, and however bad things may have gotten, he's a better person now. But he can't let himself forget who he was, or it'll start all over again. And you can tell that that's much less likely to happen now because he's been humbled by the experience, and people aren't going to be so keen to let him do whatever he wants anymore, as indicated by his final scene with Princess Carolyn, where she's up for it, yes, but unsure about helping him find more work again. So in many ways, this is the perfect conclusion to Bojack's arc. He needed to lose this time, because his self-improvement in part 1 was only one half of the equation, and it would have been precarious and hollow and not as solid a conclusion without the downfall to balance it out. Because without the consequences, a total relapse and a return to the status quo again would have been much more likely. It's unlikely now, and so this is the perfect note to end the show on. This scene in the finale where Todd and Bojack are talking on the beach was the perfect way to leave their relationship. Bojack's fucked Todd over on many occasions, the Series 3 rationed usage of the F-word burned the bridges of their friendship, supposedly for good, that's what all the other F-words have done. They're not totally healed now, of course, but Bojack's better now, and hey, if Todd can hang out with him on the beach on Bojack's shoulders after everything that happened, maybe there is some hope for Bojack. Maybe he can heal some of those damaged relationships and actually do some good in the world now. And I like to think that eventually, maybe he will be able to reconnect with Hollyhock again. That's something for you to cling on to after easily the biggest gut punch in the entire series. The fact he's carrying this letter around all episode while he's calling her and just getting through to her voicemail makes it all the more horrifying when his worst fears get confirmed. I'm so glad that we don't find out what the letter actually said, because as I've said before, you've got to be really, really fucking careful with a show like this, and too far could end up being legitimately psychologically damaging. We didn't need to hear the burning bridges F-word from Hollyhock. All we needed to hear was the number was disconnected, have the look on Bojack's face, and for him to drop the pages. If I'd actually heard what Hollyhock said in this letter, then maybe I wouldn't have this hope that there's a minute possibility of a bit of reconciliation in the future. You know, post-series. Things being left unsaid are an important tool that Bojack Horseman's used over the years, which has particular attention drawn to it in the Angela Diaz episode. The way that Herb's firing was presented to us back when we saw it was as something beyond Bojack's control, so we didn't really judge Bojack for not standing up to her. But now, hearing that it was a bluff and that it wouldn't have happened if Bojack hadn't been so weak and things would have been fine if he'd threatened to walk, is a perfect way of underscoring Bojack's problem. He just sort of lets things happen because it's easier that way. He spent all these years running from his problems, just saying yes to things so that all this will go away, always giving in to his worst impulses because it's easier that way. And all of that finally catches up with him and it all happens all in one go, and it's just as scary for the viewer as trying to square the fact they want Bojack to succeed, even though we know that what he did was incredibly fucked up. Easily the most terrifying episode of any animated show, hell, any show that I've ever seen, was the penultimate episode, The View from Halfway Down. Bojack Horseman's surreal episodes are usually bleak and emotionally wounding, but having an entire half-hour dream sequence episode where we have all these hints that Bojack's killed himself and that this is what he's seeing as he dies is a fucking brutal and insanely clever method of emotionally torturing your audience. It's this moment here where Bojack lets us know that this scenario is a recurring dream of his that usually ends before they all perform a show, but he doesn't wake up this time. That instills a mortifying sense of pure dread throughout the rest of the runtime. And having Secretariat reading this poem about his own suicide as the door's slowly getting closer to him is the kind of slow, subtle terror that you'd never expect from a show like this. And it makes so much sense doing this here because this is Bojack's halfway down, a hallucination he's having halfway to death. People keep asking me to make a new top 10 episodes list for the show, which... please don't make me do that, guys. Please. Seriously, it was already impossible enough to rank any episode of the show when I had 3 seasons of it. Now I've got 6. I would never be able to put together a top 10 list now. But yeah, The View from Halfway Down is, if not the new number 1, it's definitely one of the new favourites. Every inch of this episode is fucking gorgeous. Particularly that conversation with Secretariat / Bojack's dad as they look down at his body in the pool. The episode might not work as well now that I know that Bojack survives, but just the imagery in this episode and the way it ties pretty much all of the events of the series together and makes it all totally relevant to what's happening on the show now is a work of genius. Although I have seen this theory being floated around that because the final episode is a loop, it starts at the end and then restarts and works its way to it, the final episode could also be a hallucination that he's having halfway to death and he actually did die in the end. To which I say, fuck this theory, fuck it, let me have this, I need this. I was so wrapped up in the tale of Bojack's downfall that I barely even noticed that we've kinda skimmed over the endings of Mr. Peanut Butter, Princess Carolyn and Todd, which is easily Season 6's biggest weakness, and the reason it turned out like this was probably because, yeah, sorry to break this to anyone who didn't know, Bojack Horseman was actually cancelled. Yeah, ending it here wasn't a natural creative decision. They got the notice and probably engineered this 2-part final season around it. The show could have gone on longer if Netflix had allowed it. My guess is that this is the ending that was always planned for Bojack himself because it's so damn perfect, makes so much sense in every way that it has to have been planned years in advance. But having to wrap it all up in one season means that's kind of come at the expense of the other characters. Theoretically, we could have had at least another season, but apparently Netflix was the one that pulled the plug. On one of their most consistently acclaimed series with a massive, incredibly dedicated fan base. Yeah, this is easily one of the most catastrophically stupid decisions that I've ever heard of a TV broadcaster making. But then again, I guess I should have expected it because catastrophically stupid decisions are so frequent at Netflix these days that they should start using that as their company slogan. All of our characters do get the right ending, of course, but these stories really could have used more time. I was quite accepting of the show ending on a high note when I covered Season 6 Part 1, but it's left a bitter taste in my mouth knowing that if we'd had a regular 12-episode Season 6 doing Bojack's recovery, then a full Season 7 doing his downfall, a few extra episodes either side of this story would have gone a long way. Now, Hollyhock's ending, as I said, is difficult to admit, but it is the right one. It's brutal, powerful, and incredibly meaningful. Some people are suggesting that the letter wasn't a severing of ties and are going as far as to suggest that she actually commits suicide, tells Bojack in the letter, and that's what sets him off, but no, come on. The entire episode is a has she or hasn't she severed ties with Bojack mystery, and there are no hints at suicide for her at all in the episode that she's actually in Season 6 Part 2. This is very clearly delivering the message that yes, she's severed ties with him. I am glad that we don't see her reaction to Pete Repeat's story on screen. She just keeps herself very distant from Bojack after a quick one while he's away as she comes to the slow realisation that she just met Bojack recently. He has a lot of history before he met her that she's been overlooking until now because she didn't know the scale of it. She had some idea of how fucked up the family is. Beatrice poisoned her for months, Bojack didn't exactly behave all that well when she stayed with him in Season 4, and he became addicted to painkillers and terrified the life out of her during Season 5. Hollyhock didn't really know who she was when she was first introduced in Season 4. She was a teenager looking for her own life and interests outside of her 8 dads, and now she's found it in college and she realises that she doesn't want to have anything to do with Bojack's shit. She's growing up now, she did just meet Bojack recently, and it's probably best for her if she does this for her own sake. It's heartbreaking that she comes to this decision, that she has to extradite herself from Bojack's life and thereby the show, but it does make sense for her. I do wish we'd seen more of Hollyhock, because as I said, I love this character so much, but I must admit that distancing herself from the narrative until brutally cutting herself out of it like this is exactly how her story should end. Princess Carolyn also gets the right ending, but she doesn't get a whole lot of focus in Season 6 Part 2, because admittedly most of that was done in Part 1, though I do think that we should have seen more of her. The scene in Part 1 where she names Ruthie is one of the most beautiful moments of the entire show, and I am so happy that she ends up with Judah. Not just because I get to showboat about the fact I was right. Ha! Look at that! I was right about something. I like that they've added that Judah is in a rubbish indie band. Any kind of human qualities that Judah has shown before have mostly been jokes to contrast the fact that he's so efficient to the point where you swear he must be a robot, but they really needed to add that in and have the sequence where his band's playing but he feels like he should be at the office helping Princess Carolyn, which just underlines how in tune their personalities are. PC and Judah both spend so much time doing things for other people that they find it difficult to actively chase their dreams. So much so that when Judah's band's playing, he leaves to go to work. And when Princess Carolyn actually gets handed her dream movie studio, she doesn't know what to do with it. And ending it with Princess Carolyn asking Judah to play her a song while she works out what to do with this movie studio really works. She's encouraging him to be creative and chase his dreams, and he encourages her to do the same. It is beautiful, but as I said, a bit more of this would have made the journey to this destination a lot more satisfying. Because, yeah, I do understand why people were skeptical of me suggesting that PC and Judah were about to get together in part 1, even if they did make it kind of obvious that that was where they were going with it, but I will admit that the foundation of their romantic relationship could have been a lot stronger. I felt the same way about Todd's ending. I do wish we'd had more than one episode with his mother. I really would have enjoyed some more focus on how her anxiety and regret over having chucked Todd out over the course of their 10-year-long estrangement has affected her mental state. What we've got is wonderful, and I'm loath to criticise it, but I would have loved like a full flashback episode where we watch Helen's journey from having kicked Todd out because she thinks it's the best for him, through her regret and the development of her anxiety over the course of those years, and the way that losing her son through her own actions has affected her mental state. It's an incredibly interesting backstory for her. If we'd seen that, then it would have been much more satisfying when we get to her realisation that her son actually has found meaning in his chaotic, dysfunctional life after all, and she actually was being a good parent when she did that. I love what we have, don't get me wrong, and I also love Maud as well, but just like with Princess Carolyn, there could have been so much more done with Todd this season. And Mr. Peanut Butter as well, I really wished we'd had more time with him during this final run. Although, to be fair, I laughed so damn loudly at the way that they removed Pickles from the show that it's probably my favourite joke in this half of the season.
As soon as she returns from her work trip, excuse me, I'm receiving a text message, and it appears we have broken up forever.
So I cannot feel all that bitter about it, even though another part of me is screaming at that moment going, fucking seriously, is that it? Most of the meaning I can take from Mr. Peanut Butter's arc in this half of the season is from the scenes where he interacts with Diane, Bojack, and that final scene with Pickles. The conversation he has on the phone with Diane where he admits that the end of his relationship with Pickles has meant he's begun to appreciate being on his own was incredibly warm, positive, and overall healthy. Throughout the show, you're supposed to kind of hate Mr. Peanut Butter for being so upbeat to the point of being excruciating, but this half of the season shows the change he's gone through in learning to accept things, not trying to change other people and carving out the kind of relationship with them that he wants, but he realises he should just be there for people if they need him. The scene where he solemnly tells Pickles to go on tour with Joey Pogo if that's what she really wants was heartbreaking in the best of ways. It was him showing the face of acceptance. And the fact that when everyone abandons Bojack, he still sticks by him and treats him like his best friend, despite the way Bojack's treated him over the years. He was just so warm and comforting through some incredibly difficult episodes that my face was just lighting up whenever he was on screen, which as said, wasn't enough. Seriously, I needed more Mr. Peanut Butter in this half of the season, and I really wished that his new attitude of acceptance had had a bit more focus. Getting on to Diane, unlike PC, Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd, we had enough time with her, and the ending is one that I'm incredibly happy about. I love Guy, and I love the fact she's finally found someone who gets her, but the show's done the important thing of emphasising that it's not just Guy who's helped her work through her issues, because that would have been way too easy and would not have been a good moral at all. The Good Damage episode is another possible addition to the new top 10. Again, I don't know how to organise this list, so please stop expecting me to. The reason I'd rate it so highly is mostly based on this moment right here in the middle where we actually see her having a full-blown panic attack and wanting to die, which was so fucking real to me that it got me shivering for hours. I've been through that, people close to me have been through that, and I relate to her search for meaning in the damage in her past all too well. I love her journey towards the realisation that the question, what was it all for if she can't make it into something, isn't a helpful one. People can turn their damage into great art that comforts people, sure, but trying to put value on your damage will just make the pain so much worse if you find that you can't translate that. But what Diane finds is that not trying to translate her damage, but by finding something new and positive and very far removed from that damage, can work just as well in helping her recover from it. This is not something that Guy's done for her. He's helped, sure, but she's found a way to replace the precedence that the damage has taken in her life for such a long time with something new, brightly coloured and positive. And I love the quirky visual stylings of Good Damage and the sketchy representation of her train of thought. It's very much a companion piece to the Bojack's train of thought episode from season 4, Stupid Piece of Shit, but it's put its own unique spin on this type of story. As said, I love all of these endings, they all make perfect sense, just a bit more of some of them would have gone a long way. Anyway, I will really miss this show like crazy, but I do come back and binge it once every 9 months or so, and whenever I do, I'm always finding new background jokes in it that I didn't notice last time, or I stumble across new interpretations of events that I hadn't considered before. Maybe that's part of why the comments on these videos are usually quite fraught, because there are so many different ways that you can analyse any one scene of this show. And I must admit, I find myself disagreeing with my own interpretations of some stuff in hindsight. And whenever I go on these occasional binge watches, I often have such a different experience that I feel like I'm watching a completely different show. So, hell, maybe next time I watch it, maybe I should treat it as if I've been given a whole new 77 episodes of Bojack Horseman. Anything to avoid having to face up to the fact the show is gone and I will never get it back, and oh fuck, Jesus, it hurts. Please say he relapses again and we're getting a season 7 next year. Wait a sec, I want a character to relapse and start doing terrible things again. God, what the fuck is wrong with me? Jesus Christ, this show makes you feel like a piece of shit.